From the moment we started Gander, the first thing, and I've said it numerous times, is social media either has to go or it's got to be fixed. And I don't see any of the major platforms fixing anything right now.
The Amber Mack Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mack Show. It is a new year, and I'm back in Toronto after a wild road trip home from Prince Edward Island with an exploding tire. Happy to say, Jeff, that everyone is safe. And we are in our studio for this week's episode. Really looking forward to a conversation we're going to have with the co-founder of Gander about how Canadians are helping to build a better Facebook. We definitely all want that. Plus, we're going to give you an update on how Elon Musk's chatbot is, once again, humiliating women.
What a surprise. And speaking of Elon Musk, we're going to chat about Tesla's fall from the top spot in global EV sales as well. And we'll tell you about a new phone that's perfect for BlackBerry fans. So let's get into this week's headlines.
Newsfeed.
Well, Elon Musk's Grok chatbot on his social media platform X decided to bring us into the new year with some non-consensual sexual imagery in response to users asking it to take the clothes off of women and put them in sexual positions, including some subjects which appeared to be children, creating hundreds of illegal images seen by thousands of people. And while some of these were taken down, Elon's reaction was to simply post jokes about it because I guess he thinks nudifying little kids is funny.
Yeah, it is horrifying once again. And if you've been following Grok's disgraceful behavior over the past year, you might remember that Musk had introduced something called a spicy mode to the AI chatbot in the summer, which generated, among other inappropriate media, topless videos of Taylor Swift. This was followed by Grok AI companions that seemed to really lean into erotic conversations. And strangely enough, the most recent batch of deepfakes seems to have been first initiated by adult content creators on X who were using Grok to generate images of themselves, which, let's be fair, is at least consensual, before the trend caught on with many others.
Yeah, like you say, it's one thing for OnlyFans types to be creating images of themselves. It's actually interesting kind of marketing, I guess, through Grok, because I bet you stuff that interacts with Grok gets treated by the algorithm better or something like that, since it's crazy X. But quite another when people are taking the same approach to create sexual imagery of other people without their consent at all, including, as we said, some of whom appear to be underage children. The Atlantic had a great piece on this, and when they and others reached out to the XAI media team, the team that's responsible for taking queries like this around on X, about how this content could exist, given that X explicitly prohibits the sexualization of children and explicitly prohibits depicting likenesses of people in a pornographic manner, XAI sent the now standard reply to anyone who asked of legacy media lies. So legacy media lies is not a very appropriate reaction to a very reasonable question, and it's just kind of pathetic how the responses come out from these people.
It is super pathetic. And I know just recently, I do want to say that I was on X and I noticed that they had an official notification that said that there would be repercussions for anyone who is creating these images, but not a lot of other information. And do you want to say that you can add what you just mentioned to Grok's own response on X posted late on New Year's Day, which read, and I'm quoting here, "Dear community, some folks got upset over an AI image I generated. Big deal. It's just pixels. And if you can't handle innovation, maybe log off. XAI is revolutionizing tech, not babysitting sensitivities. Deal with it unapologetically, Grok."
It's just pathetic. And it wasn't an AI image. It was hundreds of images. And like we said, little kids and stuff like this. So to double down like that, it's just crazy. Like, first of all, AI chatbots cannot apologize. So it doesn't really matter what it says in that sort of sense. But obviously, this thing is tuned to be a bit of a dick like the guy who built it. So thankfully, Musk is getting some comeuppance via Tesla's continually eroding EV dominance, even as Tesla puts forth newer, cheaper models and engages in other efforts like 0% financing over 6 years, which is actually a pretty good deal for car industry stuff. But Tesla's biggest competitor is China's BYD, and it has now pushed Tesla from the top spot in global EV sales in 2025. In fact, in that year, Tesla's EV sales dropped by 9%. And when you look at the final quarter of the year, because the drop has been accelerating, it's down a full 16% in the final quarter of 2025 compared to the year before. So, I hope this informs the people at Tesla that maybe their ridiculous $1 trillion pay package for somebody like Musk, who's just hurting their brand right and left, is a silly thing to do. But we'll see how that works out for them all. Thankfully, it's nice to see some public pushback from somebody who's just behaving in a completely unacceptable way.
Absolutely. That's probably going to continue. And we do want to say that EV sales are slowing, and that is perhaps because of the reduction of incentives in many jurisdictions. Countries like Norway, however, have made huge accomplishments, having reached 97% EV sales in 2025. I had to double check that number because it is just massive and so impressive. And it's not just what the Trump crowd would probably call woke jurisdictions that are making efforts relative to EVs. Florida, of all places, is incorporating technology to wirelessly charge electric vehicles into a new highway west of Orlando, which will include things like solar power for infrastructure and even wildlife crossings.
Wow. That seems pretty politically uncharacteristic of Florida. But as I always say, I don't much care who does things. I just care that people are doing the right things. So, let me provide Florida with a rare compliment on that front, and sincerely, we all hope for more of that. So that's a highway that's going to be built in the near future there. But speaking of EVs and self-driving cars, an airplane near Denver has become the first ever airplane to automatically land itself due to an in-flight emergency. So it went through all the stages it needed, including finding an appropriate nearby airport, making announcements to air traffic control, and successfully landing the plane. So there were no passengers on board for this. That was just the pilots on board. But they did experience a legitimate emergency, and everything went well. So that seems pretty good for a test run for that. And good news all around.
Well, I spend way too much time on the internet because as you were reading this, I was thinking to myself, if it can land the plane safely, where else can it take the plane? A little concerning, but no, you're right. I think on the safety front, that is a big win in our books. Now, let's bring things back to Canada. Toronto's very own Drake is being targeted with others in a class action suit, claiming he promoted an illegal online casino. And this is probably even more disappointing, allegedly funneled some of those funds to bot farms to drive up his streaming numbers.
Yeah, so none of this has been proven in court yet, but yeah, there's a couple people who have put this case in place. I talked about online sports betting recently on the other Mac, and I don't really think gambling has a place online at all. But just to be clear, Drake's case is really centered around the fact that real money gambling online is illegal in various U.S. states, and the online casino in question, Stake.us, is accused of doing an end run around this restriction by selling play money with free tokens that can then be converted into cash. So you are just a step removed from it being gambling with real money online, which, as I said, is not legal in a lot of jurisdictions. But I kind of agree with you that the more unsightly part of this is Drake's alleged campaign to boost his music streams. And as the suit alleges, quote, fabricate popularity, disparage competitors and music label executives, and distort recommendation algorithms which suppressed authentic artists and narrowed consumers' access to legitimate content. Drake, you don't need Kendrick Lamar beating you down with diss tracks if you're going to be doing this stuff to yourself. So I'd say smarten up a bit if any of this holds any water at all.
Well, or you're going to get another diss track from Kendrick Lamar. It might be even worse. The past one was a doozy for sure. Now, continuing with our stories out of Canada, I saw this in a BetaKit blog post. And if you were a fan of BlackBerry back in the day, this should make you pretty happy. The Clicks Communicator is essentially an Android phone with a clicky keyboard of a BlackBerry, a 4-inch OLED screen, a headphone jack, like an actual real headphone jack, and micro SD storage. The catch with this new device is that it's closer to a dumb phone in that it's intended to be used mostly for messaging and communicating. It is going to be on the floor at CES this year. I hope we get our hands on one to review in the near future. I just connected with the founder, I think, who is based in the UK, but it would be really fun to be able to review this and see what it's like.
Yeah, I'd love to try that out. And they're kind of pitching it as a secondary phone. I'm not sure how that model is going to really work, but we'll see. They also have, if you're just in it for the keyboard, I believe they actually have a case for other Android phones that includes the keyboard, so you can get at that part of it. But yeah, excited to see what that looks like. And you know, part of the motivation for the sort of minimalist dumb phones is to get away from the endless, mindless scrolling that so many people have become addicted to. And we've talked a lot about AI slop on the show, which is contributing to that like crazy. And it seems none other than the head of Instagram is starting to recognize how big a problem this is, claiming that Instagram will be releasing tools to better support authentic human creators in the future to try to address this.
Yeah, well, that is good news. And one interesting thing he says is that when it does come to detecting AI created materials, it may be, and I'm quoting here, more practical to fingerprint real media than fake media, suggesting that camera manufacturers could sign images when they're created, since AI is getting increasingly good at imitating reality over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the tools that they have that are detecting fakes are going to have a harder and harder time about it. So something does need to be done. I'm not sure what he's proposing would be the most robust solution, given that there can be a lot of subsequent sort of manipulation of those images. And does that fingerprint stay intact? How does that all work? But at least it shows they're acknowledging there is a problem. So let's keep our eyes on that one and fingers crossed that they're going to do something that is helpful, because anything to combat the amount of AI content online is just going to overwhelm us all. But speaking of problems, another thing the new year is bringing in, certainly here in Canada, because there's a couple big announcements about this that we'll talk about, is return to office mandates. And Amber and I are going to talk about the changing rules and what the expectations should be in our next segment.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167. The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167. Work smarter.
The new year in Canada is bringing some major changes in terms of in-office work expectations, with provincial staff in Ontario and Alberta being required to come back to the office full-time, and federal workers are expected to be in the office a minimum of 3 days a week. There's also banks like RBC, Scotiabank, and BMO that have asked staff to be in their offices in person 4 days a week, and other private sector companies are really following suit. Jeff, this is such a hot topic. People get very emotional about remote work. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, it really depends. So first of all, I would say private companies can do what they want, right? They'll go out of business if it doesn't work. If they bring everyone back to the office and everyone hates it, and everyone leaves, they'll go out of business. So they can do what they want on this. That's whatever private company decides to do is up to it, as long as it's not like, hurting people or breaking laws kind of thing. Where I think this, and as your examples off the top show, really it comes into sort of a more clear kind of issue for me is around the public servant side of it. So federal workers, provincial workers, less so municipal, but even that sort of stuff. And I think my issue with it is that in the name of flexibility, we're doing things that are actually less flexible. So let me explain. I think any job worth having if you have to, whatever, I booked a dentist appointment and it's near my house and it's late in the morning, I'll just work from home and then go to that and come in the afternoon. That's flexibility. Trying to make people only have to come into work for 2 or 3 days a week has an assortment of problems that are very wide in terms of the things they touch. One thing, I agree with anyone who's opposed to going into work when they have to swap desks. I don't want to swap a desk. I didn't go to university and work my whole life to go to a desk that I share with somebody else. I want a place where I can put my lip balm and in the drawer
Oh,
and pictures of my family on the desk. That's part of what makes going to work sort of bearable, is to have your own place and not to have to be carting things back and forth or using some desk where some slob leaves it terribly messy or does something like that. So I get when people complain about stuff like that. The solution isn't to try to figure out how to do that. The solution is let people have their own desks, but expect them to come into work, be flexible when they have needs that need to be attended to. And sure, it may be normal to work from home a day a week, but it's not something that needs to be legislated that everyone does, because some people don't necessarily want to be working from home, and some people may work from home and take advantage of it. So there's a bunch of other things I could go through, but I'd love to hear your thoughts before I tackle any more of that, Amber.
Well, I have to say that we've never spoken about this before, and I was surprised at your open-mindedness to this, because I thought for sure you were going to be like, everybody back in the office 5 days a week, no excuses. But it's good to hear that flexibility. I think actually what you're talking about is really important, which is make the office more attractive for people and make it make more sense, right? And so
Mhm.
I know about a year ago, I posted on LinkedIn and I spoke about remote and flexible work. And it was the most viewed post I'd ever put on LinkedIn in my life. People were really interested in this topic and really passionate about it. And one of the things you realize is that the word is flexibility. And I think you really hit on that, right? We want something where you have flexibility. So if you need to do the things that you need to do, you have a manager or a boss who is flexible to that. So I spoke a little bit in that post about women and caregivers, right? Who tend to have more responsibilities around the house. So flexible work and remote work can be really good for them. But let's say, for example, just taking your use case scenario that we make the office more attractive, then what about getting daycares in office buildings so that it makes more sense for people to come into the office because they know that's where their daycare is. And maybe there's a gym there. And maybe all of a sudden we see that the office becomes a much more inviting place, because I think you really hit the nail on the head. What has happened is that the office has become a place where people just don't want to be for one reason or another, because I think what's happened is it's become a really uncomfortable place to work, whereas working from home is obviously, and we've seen this through the pandemic, become so comfortable.
Yeah, and I think there's a bigger level here too, and it's another reason why I think public servants have a more responsibility here than private sector. It's, what do we want our society to be like? I am sure some of these people arguing for, the what they would call sort of the sanity of being able to work from home and how that's like a kinder, gentler thing. I think those people are gravely missing the point. I think there are tons of things. We talk about the loneliness epidemic and stuff like that. Work is one of the places that you can overcome those sorts of things. It's, it may not be what everyone wants, but for some people it's important. It's also, you don't know, like my wife was saying, when people are working from home all the time, you don't know if your coworkers are okay. You don't know if somebody spends their time off the call, like crying because they are undergoing some terrible issue. There's no way to check in on things like that because it all disappears when you work remotely. So there is a lack of connection and camaraderie that I think you'll see all sorts of data about. I think these are normally done in private sector circumstances, so I don't know if it's been done in public sector, but where people are just as productive at home. That's not the whole equation. The whole equation is trying to live in the society, make the society we want to live in. So the very people who are arguing for work from home, who I'm sure a lot of them, their heart's in the right place, are creating a world where, people who have addictions are falling into them further, where instead of living out among people and getting, the human touch and interaction that is healthy for us mentally and emotionally, we're shoving everyone back onto the internet and making them use phones and screens for everything. That's not kindness. That's not the world we want to live in. And I think the public service has to lead with they're there for the public. I think they should set an example. I think it's like the military. You should be proud to be a public service servant, and you should be proud to know you're doing a great job. But part of the job you're doing is going to town to the office and supporting your local businesses, spending that money. These are all things people claim to want to do who also argue against going back to work. Buy local, buy all this. All that stuff happens naturally when people go into work. So, as I said, flexibility is totally reasonable. It's a matter of respect. But the business needs to respect the employee. The employee also needs to respect the business, and the businesses can reasonably demand you go into work. And if that's not a good fit for you, it's not a good fit for you. Go find another job. There'll be another job that lets you have that flexibility. But to say we've got 350,000 federal public civil servants alone in Canada, to say that all those people only need to be going into work 3 days a week, it's not good. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for our communities. And I think it gives people a terrible idea about what the half of your life you spend at work is supposed to be like.
And I will say just one last point on this. When we're talking about mandates of 3 days a week in the office, I would say that that is actually pretty fair. And I kind of agree with you. We should be focusing more on flexibility. But I will say that that still gives you some good flexibility. That still means you have 4 days of the week where you're working from home. I mean, it's pretty, I think, considerate in some ways. So I don't think it's that extreme. And I will say that when it comes to private sector, like banks, for example, listen, time will tell, because all of a sudden you may not have a competitive advantage that you need because you're not flexible enough, because, maybe RBC says that you have to be in the office 4 days a week, but maybe Scotiabank says it's only 3. I mean, where are people going to go? That's going to be something that you can use within your recruiting, right? Depending on who wants whatever scenario there might be there. So to me, it feels like one of these things where flexibility is really the key thing. And I would really push this idea of make it easier to get to the office, make it easier to be in the office, and provide more amenities within the office space. And listen, this trickles all the way back to even supporting public transportation. Here in Toronto, we have a huge issue insofar as the commute to work. So I feel for people who are in their cars 2-3 hours a day. That is unacceptable. But we need to invest in better public infrastructure. Or maybe we need to provide or insist on tolls when it comes to going on our highways into the city, because what we have now is not working for people. Because if we're trying to increase productivity, it's not going to happen under these circumstances.
Well, it's great that you mentioned the public transit side of it, because again, that'd be the downside for a lot of people. Oh, it takes so long to get to work, whatever. Well, we've done mostly a terrible job with public transit in our country. It needs to get better. It's not going to get better by saying that you don't have to leave your house. That's not how it gets better. And do you know who's in charge of building public transit? Those would be public sector workers. Those are people who are part of that system. So fix those problems. Don't we have a terrible habit of trying to put on our blinders and look at something so myopically that we come up with the wrong solution. So I think absolutely the transit times to get to work, that's terrible. Make your offices places where people can get to easily, for sure. But we're building a world with worse traffic, more sprawl, and all this stuff on the back of people not having to go into work. So there's just too many important aspects of it. And, you want to show union people want to show solidarity with other unions and stuff like this. Take that spirit, show solidarity with your fellow citizens, and try to live the life that we should be able to make, enjoyable, pleasant, and fulfilling. Have a respectful relationship with your employer and with your employees, but it means doing things that may be longer term, may be harder, but the answer isn't just to shut everything down because there's some kind of problem. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but all in all, I don't think there's going to be any moving back from it. And this was because we had a global pandemic, guys. This is why this happened. We don't really have it anymore. And on that, if I can give my final thought, we need to also adapt to some other things where normalize. If you've got a sniffle, don't go into work as an employee, and as an
Fair.
employer, don't be a jerk about them not going into work because they're not sick. That's exactly what we should do. That's the flexibility. All the things I've talked about are around flexibility and respect. Its flexibility is not trying to figure out a way for half of humanity to spend, 2 working days at home instead of in their office. It's not a good fit for everyone, and I just don't think it's good for society.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
In our tech wish list for Canada for 2026, we talked about why Canadians need a better choice in the social media space. Thankfully, the team over at Gander is working hard to make that happen. To get the latest on how Gander has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from individuals online to build a new kind of social network, the platform's co-founder and CEO, Ben Waldman, spoke to Amber. Here's their conversation.
Makers.
It has been a couple of months since we last spoke, and I know a lot has happened with Gander, and I want to get all of the updates. But before we do, just for people who aren't familiar with Gander, give us the 60-second pitch in terms of what you're trying to build.
Yeah. So flashback to just about a year ago, we went through we didn't go through the U.S. election, but kind of the whole world went through the U.S. election, and talk of 51st state really drove a lot of conversations online about data sovereignty, kind of disparate opinions about the elections were really coming to light. And, we've pretty much spent the last 10 years easily with social media creating more and more division. And I just thought we can do something about this. And so Gander was kind of born from that. Just decided to create social media that is actually social and hosted in Canada under our values and our laws.
It is something that Canadians do want. I think we've seen this, especially over the past few months. But one of the things that surprised me is just the number of people who have stepped up to become investors in Gander. So,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the crowdfunding, because to me, this feels like a total tipping point insofar as the future of Gander.
Yeah, so when we first kicked this off, I've been involved in a few startups, largely in more of the B2B kind of space. And we started exploring how we're going to fund this thing. And so, at first friends and family, some of them. And then, we did start talking to VC. And what we quickly learned was that the growth at all costs model, the VCs tend to be looking for that kind of unicorn. And while I hesitate to say that we're not a unicorn, in as much as that would be a silly thing to say, but what we're not looking for is to the growth at all costs, and being beholden to stakeholders who may have intentions that aren't our own. And ultimately, we realized that the Canadians, more or less average Canadian, and the folks who are following us and have been our supporters, would in fact be our best partners. And so we connected with Front Funder, and we put up a campaign. We were looking to raise 1.5 million minimum, with an ultimate goal of 2.5, but with a comfortable goal of 1.5, and we did that within a few weeks. And now we're at 1.7275 with 2,100 Canadians who've all invested from as little as $250. So we're very excited.
It is incredible to see the support that Gander has had. Just full disclosure, I've been an advisor for the past few months and have a little bit of the inside story of Gander. It has evolved in terms of what Gander will be, especially from a technology standpoint, because I know it was first planned to be built on Blue Sky. That has shifted a little bit. We are now in 2026. So, can you give us an update as far as what Gander is today in terms of the technology behind it?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So it's still built on what they call the atmosphere, the decentralized network that is kind of the backbone of Blue Sky. Only what we're doing is we're creating the sovereign version of that. So it's interoperable with Blue Sky, meaning you can retrieve and post to Blue Sky if you choose. But then the app itself, initially we had started off with Blue Sky's app, which also is open source, as our base. But all of the things that we really wanted to do with Gander it wasn't going to work for us to start from that place. And so we moved into building our own app from scratch instead of kind of, hacking what Blue Sky's already done. And so it was a big shift for us. You're in the middle of a startup, you're trying to raise funds and all of this, and then you decide, you know what, let's start over. But kind of out of necessity and out of wanting to do something unique. So yeah, big shift, but we're now in a place where we're in very early beta testing with friends and family, and of course with the team. I very narrowly had an invite for you for Christmas. I was looking so forward to that. But I really do want this to be. It's got to be not just passable. It's got to be good. And so, yeah, so we're fixing bugs now. We just got chat implemented on the platform, which because of Christmas, I haven't even had a chance to look at yet, but I'm very excited for that. And the team, the developers, they're all kind of working as hard as they can, including some through the holidays.
There is a lot of pressure on you and the team because to be able to get out into the Canadian marketplace with something that is better than Facebook is not an easy task for anyone. How do you feel at this moment in time when you think about the expectations that people have
Yeah.
of Gander?
Yeah. And I recognize that we've set some of those expectations ourselves. There's definitely pressure, and I think the way that we look at the app is not as like a Facebook killer or an Instagram killer or TikTok. We've blended a lot of features from a lot of different apps. The things that not just we like personally, but the things that we believe have the best chance of bringing the most Canadians on board, for one. Like, people love groups on Facebook, and the younger audiences want to make sure they have that Instagram image like experience. There are people who still like to flip through TikTok videos and reels and that kind of thing. So we're blending all of those things, but then also really giving it a social element, while trying to mitigate things like disinformation, misinformation, bullying, hate, all of that stuff. So trying to make it a friendlier place.
I think that you have a bit of an advantage right now because the Facebook experience has deteriorated. Despite my very strong opinions about Mark Zuckerberg and the team, if I even put those aside and I actually think about my experience on Facebook, it feels to me like the early days of decay. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. It reminds me a little bit of the MySpace days when you started to realize, okay, you know what, this isn't working as well as it's supposed to work,
Yeah.
and user expectations aren't being met. What can you take away from the disappointment that some Canadians have within that Facebook ecosystem to build something that is so much better?
So I think the missing element, and like the things that are still popular, but for some people, it is, the only place it exists. Things like groups, places where you are having these kind of personal or one-on-one or group communications that aren't invaded by advertising all the time, and where you don't feel that manipulation, where the feed is just I don't even know these people. Who is this? What's this content that? And so these places where there's points of interest, I think that's something that is it still does well on Facebook, and that's something that we are really gravitating toward. Um, and then I think it comes down to not manipulating people. That's for us anyway, is that you can sense it. You just know when you're being advertised to, and it's the algorithm is taking over, and we like to think of the user as the algorithm again, or instead of us producing one for them.
Oh, when you think about the next few months, I know a lot of people are waiting to try Gander out, and I have to say that I have a bunch of questions that people sent me, ironically on Threads, to ask you today. So we're going to get to those in just a couple of minutes. But what do the next few months look like? Because one of the things I'm sure you have to take advantage of is this momentum and this feeling of Canadian pride and this desire for more digital sovereignty. All of those things have been building over the past few months. So you have a bit of a window to take advantage of that momentum.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it comes down to that pressure thing in some ways, and having, setting expectations, and we try to be transparent, like when we made our shift, in technology, we made sure that that was on our roadmap, that, things had extended. Um, and so it comes down to more of that pressure than that pressure and the pressure we put on ourselves to make sure we're keeping Canadians and others safe in the social environment, as opposed to just grow at all costs. Um, and so, yeah, we're in this window. I don't know when it closes. I mean, it seems like no social media platform can do anything good at the moment. So that kind of helps. And then, on the political side, obviously, Canadians are still fearful, and I'm fearful for all of us. So I don't know when that window really closes. But what the next few months look like is, so right now we have 37,000 people on our early access program who all want to get onto the platform, grab a username, all of that stuff. 10,000 people who want to be beta testers. And so our goal is to get all of those people on there for the end of March. But recognizing that, okay, I haven't tested chat yet. Let's see how that goes. We're going to be doing this in phases. It'll be smaller and then larger groups, and a big piece of that too is, as you said, the data sovereignty piece. We're not running off of Amazon or Google, or like, this is, we're building something that's really different. And so while the app may look great and work great, and that's, our, of course, the goal, we really have to make sure that the platform can support it as well. And so there'll be some scary moments of, okay, today let's let on 5,000 people and see what happens. But that's kind of the plan right now, is to just gradually increase the number of people on there right till the end of March. And hopefully we get everybody on there and start getting invites to other people.
You and I have run into each other at a couple of conferences in Canada, including one that was focused on the future of AI, as well as one that was focused on digital sovereignty and keeping people safe online. As you attend these events and think about the desire and need for a different platform in the social media space, what have you learned along the way about what's going to make Gander a win for people?
It's funny because you go to these events and there's this focus, right? Like, as you mentioned, there was the AI event, and of course, it's the AI gold rush. That's what it seems like there. And then you go to something that's more around the data sovereignty side, and academics and social interest and that kind of thing. There is a certain contingent of Canadians who see the big picture, who see the flaws in existing social media. They see the flaws in it being owned entirely by foreign interests. Um, and I think that that audience is increasing. And what I also see is that that's maybe like it's a tip of the iceberg. It's a small number of people, and there's a vast majority of people who don't know, don't care, unfortunately. And so the big thing for us is we want to bring Canadians on for a safer experience, whether they know it's safer or want it to be safer or not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that more Canadians are becoming more aware of this issue. I will say that as someone who covers the consumer tech world, I think what you have really in your favor is the fact that there is much more awareness over the past year from
Yeah.
Canadians who are recognizing that, okay, wait, these algorithms are dangerous to both me and my family and my neighbors and my community. And then they recognize a bit more about the importance of digital sovereignty, and then they're seeking out these made in Canada alternatives. So all of those things are, I think, are happening, whereas 5, 10 years ago I don't think that was the case. But there's been a shift in the mindset, I think, among
Yeah.
Canadians that will be for the better. I know there's a ton of pressure on you and the team right now, but if you think about kind of your hopes and dreams for Gander, what does that look like? When do you wake up and say, "Okay, we did it"?
Yeah, I mean, so that's interesting. I've been asked similar questions before, like when do you deem this a success? And certainly, as I said, we're not aiming to be the Facebook killer. We are one of there are others across around the world who are, building similar platforms, and I think that's a nice thing about this is it's people are waking up to every country, every region needs its own sovereign tech, and social is one of those things. Um, and I think the success for me would be, uh, you know, uh, even if 1 million Canadians joined Gander, and we were protecting 1 million people from, protecting their data, protecting them from manipulation and from the disinformation, that would be a success. And I think, the disinformation, misinformation piece of it, uh, having it actually work would really be a success for me. Yeah, like the the idea that we can educate while people have a user experience, that's what we're aiming for. Yeah, our hope is that really works, and that, yeah, there's a sovereign social cloud in Canada.
You've said a couple times you don't want to be the Facebook killer, and I have to ask, why not? Because Facebook should be killed in many ways, and I know you probably can't say that, but I mean, isn't that sort of something that would be good for our communities?
100%. So from the moment we started Gander, the first thing, and I've said it numerous times, is social media either has to go or it's got to be fixed. And I don't see any of the major platforms fixing anything right now. And so, yeah, yes, it would be fantastic if that happened, if Gander became the alternative. That whole thing of setting expectations that we talked about just a few minutes ago. I don't wanna be a growth at all cost machine, and I want to make sure that we do this in a really sane way, and if the result of that is that other platforms, you know, fail to compete, the US market wants to come onto Gander, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So yeah, and I don't think it's a solo, venture either. Really, as I said, Gander is one of many. There's Eurosky. There are others in Australia who are building platforms. And I think combined, those are the things that end up being the Facebook killer, the X killer, or at least causing a real dent. So,
Sure. Yeah, so your answer is very Canadian, I have to say. It's very, very
yeah,
polite.
yeah.
But I think deep inside, Ben, I think I've gotten to know you a little bit. I don't think that would be a bad outcome if we, ate away at their market share here in
Absolutely.
Canada.
It's got to change either way. Something's got to change. So,
It really does. So I had mentioned that just before we started this interview, I went on to Threads, and hopefully, eventually, that will be Gander that I go on to ask these questions. But I asked people if they had any questions for you. I think you definitely answered some of them, but I do want to read out. We have about 4 or 5 questions from people,
sure.
just so perhaps you can give us some insight. The first one is from Z Chamu, who says, I would love to know if there's plans for creator monetization. Have seen lots of people in other countries making bank off other platforms, but nothing here.
Yeah, and that's something that, we talked about early on and is in our plans. In fact, we've done a bit of modeling of what monetization might look like, and that is definitely in our plans. Everything from creators being able to, sell tickets to events, sell digital products, create private monetized groups, that kind of thing. That is absolutely in our plans. It may not be in the way that others are currently used to, where you're earning advertising dollars, percentages. That's not something that we're looking at right now. but certainly more ethical approaches to creators monetizing. Absolutely.
Bingo Fuel, which is quite the handle, asks, how will Gander deal with AI generated content and imagery? I feel like slop is invading every social channel, and refuge from it would be amazing.
Yeah, that is a tough one. So the challenge is what's the best way to moderate AI is probably another AI. And that's not something that, like, we're very adamant about being sovereign. We're adamant about using Canadian or open source tech. And those are things that can be done. Also, there's a huge contingent of our user base who doesn't want their content even, remotely scanned by AI. And so there's a lot to get through in that. The biggest steps that we're taking in order to mitigate some of this is we can't afford to build AI to fight AI. So what we're doing is we're doing adult human verification, which there'll be multiple facets of. The first of which is going to be send us a toonie via Interact with a connected system, which identifies that you're not only Canadian, which for now we're kind of trying to limit things to, but you're an adult, and you have been identified by a bank. So that's the first step. And ultimately, we're looking at other platforms like Canada Post, who has on-phone ID verification, because we don't want people's data. That's the thing, is we don't want your identifying information. If we can avoid it, we'd rather not have to store it. And so platforms like Canada Post, that your ID stays on your phone. It just tells us, yep, this is an adult human. So we're looking at those as options, with the idea that you can't post, comment, or chat on the platform without being identified as a human. So now that doesn't mitigate somebody else creating AI slop and putting it on the platform. And so what we're aiming to do is, around moderation, is encouraging people to flag it so that it can be labeled and people can keep it out of their feeds if they like. And we're also aiming to get users to flag it up front. So if you post something that's AI, click the button that says it's AI so that others can filter it out if they want. And then what that also means is that it's not up to just moderators. It means we're trying to create a culture that specifically you can get called out if you don't flag it as AI and we find out it is, or users find out that it is. So those are the things we're looking at right now.
Great. Chris asks, what would Gander do to combat misinformation and disinformation? And I should say we have a similar question here from an account called Unbothered Moose, which is very Canadian. So you touched a little bit about on misinformation and disinformation, but that's a hard thing to control, but critically important.
Yeah, and so we've been figuring out how to do this from the get-go, and we think from the start the best approach is going to be, first of all, we're allowing news links.
Yay.
Yeah. Second of all,
Facebook killer.
we're allowing news links. Every link, image, video, whatever it is that you're posting is actually the type of post that you're producing. It's actually reflected in the name. If you're posting a link, it says link. Or if you're posting news, it says news. So that it's identifying that that's what this is. Meaning, someone posts an image of a news article that's fake, you will be able to see that it's an image, first of all. Second of all, each post that, especially with news, is put through an API that provides what the bias and what the fact-checking record is for that publisher. So again, it's educating users on, oh, hey, I read a lot of this stuff, or I'm posting a lot of this stuff, and look at that, it's all left-leaning with low fact-checking, for example. Like it's educating the individual, and the individual who posts it, and the individual who reads it. So we hope that there's something there where people can start to identify where misinformation is coming from, and identify for themselves when they're spreading it, which we hope will be helpful. And then ultimately, there's, and not in the first release by any means, we think there's some work to do around how people go about posting. Like I brought this up with someone the other day, and I said, you get a lot of people who make statements as though they're fact. Pierre Polyev did this, as though they're fact when they may not be, or Trudeau, or whatever it is. And part of the problem is our education system has taught us that, well, if you're writing a paper and you make a statement, it's your opinion, right? It's your opinion. But social media has taken that away. Social media, you scan, you're not reading a paper, you're not coming in with the assumption that, and so my belief is that users are seeing things, taking them in as fact, as opposed to just opinion. And so we're looking for ways to ensure that users start thinking about how they phrase things, because it's something simple as, if you start with "I believe," as opposed to, Polyev did this, I believe Polyev did. All of a sudden, there's a different context there, a different meaning. And so our hope is that when people do post things that they are claiming to be factual, that they actually start to back it up. And then when they're not, that they maybe start using language that is a little bit more clear. But again, these are long-term goals. We're not anywhere near that yet.
One last question for you from Virtual Hammy. And Virtual Hammy says, do we have an official launch date for the app or even the beta?
Yeah. So, technically we're in our beta right now, though very, very close and small. And we're going to be sending out invites in the next couple of weeks to start getting more and more people on. It's going to be small groups as we go. And, depending on what happens with chat, you may get on there and be like, oh, there's got chat, but it doesn't work. I can't chat. There are going to be bugs that need to be resolved. But thankfully, we have a great team. We're working with a company called Eggshell Company, who's just expanded in order to help us accelerate things and bring more features out faster. And they're just fantastic. So I have every confidence that we're going to start really having a lot of people on there. And by March, invites will start going out from users to other users. So.
Thanks, Ben and Amber. Next week, we've got a CES special with the latest from Las Vegas. And remember, you can find all of our segments on YouTube at Amber Mac. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.